idea of you. It's got romance. It's got Anne Hathaway. It's got a young, hot, British pop star that may or may not be mostly based on Harry Styles. What more could you want?
Nothing! Absolutely nothing!
Let's take a little look behind the scenes into the process of making this movie. I'm Brooke, and this is From Script to Screen, brought to you by Retro Penguin. Now, I'm assuming if you clicked on this video, you already know the plot of the film, but just for a short and wildly undetailed refresher, the film follows Solène, a newly 40-year-old single mother to her teenage daughter, Izzy. Due to a mishap with her ex-husband, Solène ends up taking Izzy and her friends to Coachella to see August Moon, a boy band her daughter used to be very into that is definitely not One Direction. This leads to Solène meeting Hayes Campbell, a member of the band who happens to be 24 years old and is definitely not Harry Styles. They eventually embark on an up-and-down romance that takes the media by storm and ultimately results in Solène calling the relationship off for the sake of her daughter, her friends, and her business. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. So, what's the first thing you might think of when it comes to the beginning stages of making a movie? Maybe it's gathering up funds, maybe it's pitching the script, but in this case, the idea of you was actually a book first. A lot of you probably already know that, but what many people might not know is that the author of this book, Robin Lee, is actually an actor as well. Yes, a fellow actor. I feel a connection to her already, other than the small difference that she's not a struggling actor. But hey, potatoes, and all that. While our girl Robin was out there grinding out auditions and booking those gigs, she was also writing her novel. And it wasn't until she was acting alongside Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan in a tiny little unknown film called 50 Shades Darker that she said to herself, "Hey, I wrote a book that kinda has these vibes." And so she shared it with her friend and co-star Gabrielle Union, who then enlisted the help of Oscar-winning producer Kathy Showman, and of course, the lovely Anne Hathaway. Now, Anne Hathaway happened to absolutely love the source material, and she decided she not only wanted to be a producer, but she wanted to play the character of Solène as well.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment.
So she was all in on this project, which is something that probably a lot of people were surprised about at first. Why? Well, because it's kind of a fan fiction. Yeah, I know. A prestigious, cream of the crop, award-winning actress wants to do a fan fiction rom-com movie? Interesting. But is it really a fan fiction? The debate is up on that one, I'll tell you that much. In an interview with EW, Robin Lee basically states that she didn't consider it to be fan fiction at all. She says that the inspiration for the character of Hayes Campbell was really just a combination of a bunch of different celebrities, with a little pinch of her real-life husband as well. Sure, that could be a pretty good argument. But here's a quote from Robin herself detailing the night she got inspiration for the book. She said, "A few years ago, my husband was away on business, and I was up late surfing music videos on YouTube." Relatable. "When I came across the face of a boy I've never seen in a band I've never paid attention to, and it was so aesthetically perfect that it took me by surprise. It was like art." I spent a good hour or so Googling and trying to figure out who this kid was, and in doing so, I discovered that he often dated older women, and so the seed was planted. Yes. I think it's safe to say that even if Hayes Campbell isn't exactly supposed to be Harry Styles, Harry was definitely on her Pinterest board, I can tell you that much. But even so, both Robin and Anne found a deeper meaning in the story, and I think that's why the movie ended up working in the way that it did. Yes, on the surface, it's a rom-com with a goofy premise, and it feels very much like the fanfiction I used to read on Wattpad, but at least they play on that, which I appreciate. You know, they don't always take it so seriously, which is helpful in those really cheesy moments.
Why? Why?
But Solène as a character has a lot of meaningful emotion that Anne was intentional about bringing to the surface. She did such an amazing job in showing the struggles that this character was going through. Selene turns 40 in the course of the film, and simply being that age as a woman was a driving factor to a huge part of this film's plot. You know, it helps comment on relationship age gaps and how much scrutiny women go through compared to men when it comes to being the older one in the relationship. It comments on how a woman at any age should be able to go on a journey and have a sense of discovery. We see so many coming-of-age stories now, but do we ever really stop growing? And another major point of the story is how Selene ultimately gives up something and someone she truly loves for the well-being of those around her. She sacrifices a part of her happiness for her daughter, her daughter's friends, and for her co-business partner who was also being affected by this media storm. We'll talk more about some of the differences between the book and the movie later, but now that we know Anne is absolutely sold on this film, how was her co-star cast? Nicholas Galitzine plays the British pop star and heartthrob Hayes Campbell in the film, and honestly, I think he did pretty well. Of course, he had practice in the world of romance films from starring in movies like Red, White, and Royal Blue and Purple Hearts. Even with that experience, I think anyone would have been at least a little nervous for what happened at his in-person audition. Apparently, during the casting process, Anne and the team asked Nick, as well as the other potential actors, to prepare a song they thought that Hayes would like and try to convince Selene to dance with him. Cute, but daunting.
It's a no for me, dog.
According to Nick, the song he chose was Always Alright by Alabama Shakes, and then they even did another song after that. And according to both Anne and Nick, it went very well, and it was clear at that point that their chemistry was impeccable. Of course, they did scenes in the audition as well, one being a highly emotional scene, and one that was more lighthearted, more of a comedic scene. And I honestly wish I could see the footage of those, because it is always so interesting to see what actors do when they first get a stab at a scene, playing a character that they have had quite little, if any, time to flesh out. But based on the final results in the film, it's obvious that they simply just play well off of each other in general. Anne said in an interview that as far as building chemistry goes, they just like joking around with each other. Cuties. So Nicholas is of course a talented actor and a musician as well, with a beautiful voice and the ability to play instruments. He was not, however, a dancer.
You want to turn your feet out, and I'm going to do this backwards, and that's what makes it look like hip-hop.
In preparation for the Coachella performance scenes, Nicholas had to attend a lot of rehearsals with the other members of August Moon. These other actors were all professional dancers, unlike Nick, so I can imagine that would be a bit nerve-wracking. Because of this, the choreographer mentioned that she got together with him at least 3 times a week, teaching him the basics of dance and helping him to loosen up and get comfortable in his body. Then altogether, they had a boy band boot camp of sorts, where they all started to figure out the individuality of their respective band members. Things like how they would carry themselves, how they would pose, and what their personalities were. It was also an interesting dynamic where Nick had to learn to incorporate more dance into his stage presence, while the others had to learn to tone theirs down a bit and sink into the other aspects of performing on a stage.
I'm a star! A great big shining star! Yeah!
So speaking of the Coachella scenes, I wanted to mention those a bit because there are some really interesting tidbits about them. For one, did you know they hired about 500 extras to fill out the crowd for the August Moon concert? That's a whole lot of people to be herding around while filming at 3 a.m.
Let me out, I'm claustrophobic. Why?
They also used some special effects to further fill out the crowd in the post-production process, but that is still a ton of people. Also, it took them only 1 night to completely film the whole concert sequence, which is completely nuts to me. It definitely wasn't a short sequence, and if you know anything about the film world, you know that setting up shots and getting every angle you need can be super tedious. As far as the other scenes at Coachella, like the daytime scenes, they filmed those in about 2 days, leaving them with only 3 total days at that location. Again, color me impressed. Now, if you're an Atlantean, you will definitely be excited to hear that the film was entirely shot in Georgia, even the scenes that took place in Europe. The studio at Candler Park served as Solenne's art gallery, which is actually in the Silver Lakes neighborhood of Los Angeles. Garibaldi's in Savannah, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, became the Paris Café, and the luxury Saint-Tropez getaway was filmed at a private residence in Buckhead. And last but not least, they dolled up the Atlanta Motor Speedway to masquerade as Coachella. Georgia represent. We love to see it. Okay, so as we near the end of the video, I wanted to hit on some of the changes that were deliberately made going from the novel to the screenplay. And I'm going to hit on about 4 main topics here. Number 1, Hayes and Izzy's ages. In the film, they are 24 and 16, respectively, but in the novel, they were 20 and 12. Yes, 20 and 12. Now, I think it was a very good idea on their part to do this because, yes, we already knew we were getting ourselves into an age gap romance, but doesn't it just feel a little bit worse to say that Solène was dating a 20-year-old than a 24-year-old?
Oh, God.
I know it's only 4 years, but honestly, it does make kind of a difference. And especially thinking of how young 12 is compared to 16, as a viewer, we already kind of struggle to support Solène and Hayes continuing the relationship once Izzy becomes negatively affected, but again, it just seems even worse to put your 12-year-old through that than your 16-year-old. Number 2, Solène's characterization. So in the book, Solène felt very sophisticated and somewhat cold, with an air of superiority rooted in her French upbringing.
Stop! I could have dropped my croissant!
It makes sense that they chiseled some of that out for the film, making her more of like a warm and approachable personality that the audience could latch onto. The director mentioned that he wanted Solène to feel like an every woman of sorts. You know, that anyone could have been the one to walk into Hayes Campbell's trailer and start a whirlwind relationship, but it just so happened to be her. And it could have been anyone. I too love to put myself in the shoes of the main character. It's a good call, Mr. Director. Number 3, Izzy's favorite member and her level of support. So in the book, Izzy's favorite member of August Moon was Hayes, who Solène ends up dating, which is supremely messed up, if you ask me. In the film, I think they definitely recognized how detrimental that would be in getting the audience to like Solène, and to like Solène and Hayes together.
Yeah, you think?
So they make it clear that Izzy's favorite was always Rory, never Hayes.
She never had a poster of Hayes in her bedroom. It was Rory. It was always Rory.
Additionally, Izzy and her friends were not supportive of the relationship in the book, whereas she and her friends are oddly fine with everything up until a point. Again, this comes down to making sure that the audience could support the 2 leads, and it was another smart choice. Last but not least, number 4, the ending. So in the film, Solène and Hayes separate from each other with this hopeful idea that in 5 years they would be able to see each other again as circumstances surrounding Izzy and both of their lives would be different. Hayes does in fact stay true to his word and shows up at Solène's art gallery 5 years later, where they share emotional looks, at which point the movie ends. We don't know that they start a relationship again, but we are at least left with a good feeling.
That's nice to see.
In the novel, however, after their breakup, we get a depressing description about how Hayes would send Solène heartfelt messages for months until they slowed down and then eventually stopped altogether before Solène had ever stopped loving him. Wow. It definitely feels more realistic of an ending, but it does leave a lot to be desired, which they resolve in the film. Another good call.
Praise the Lord.
All right, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the film. Did you think of it as a fan fiction? Do you agree with the changes they made from the novel? And if you know any extra fun facts about the process of making this film, any behind the scenes things, let me know in the comments as well. This has been From Script to Screen. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you next week. That's a wrap.